Meatloaf is such a gross thing to call a food. Like moist meatloaf. Did you ever like meatloaf growing up?
I do like meatloaf.
I can't eat it just by the name.
I never had it growing up. It's definitely like an American thing, I think, right?
Is slacking ketchup on it's a hamburger.
Catsup. You're showing your age and your southernness because you're calling it catsup. It's catsup.
It's so gross.
Absolutely.
Meatloaf.
But you see the sense behind it, right? You get all of the, whatever leftovers and, just get a bit of ground beef. You throw it all in a thing, mix it all up, put a couple of eggs and some breadcrumbs in there. Job done.
Could have called it like a meat souffle. It would have been more more palatable.
There's no way you're going to encourage people to use souffle, which is a classy term, to describe throwing a bunch of beef, chicken giblets and sausage in a freaking whatever and schlepping it with some catsup.
Catsup. All right, welcome to Uber Cube, the place we discuss all things cube and apparently meatloaf, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, a.k.a. Uber Bear, and today we've got all three of us back today. Let's start out with the one we missed the most. She knows who she is.
Hi, it's me. I'm the May.
Hi, May. We missed you. We like the listeners
I
have
missed
been
y'all too.
They've been boycotting us until you come back. We've been getting bring May back. Hashtag Where's May? We literally like a true crime novel.
Picketing, rioting.
It's been the front page of all the Cube news is May's absence and speculation around it. So we can put all that to bed. Yeah, absolutely. May's back.
Well, and then we have the lovely Stu who cannot say ketchup correctly.
It's catsup, not ketchup or ketchup. It's ketchup.
What did the mama tomato say to the baby's tomatoes when they're crossing the street?
Ketchup.
That's right. And we have a guest today. Hello, guest.
Hey, it's Chris, otherwise known as Sandwich. How y'all doing?
I'm doing great, man. Where do you
You
stay
really just got demoted to guest.
You did. Hi, guest. Well, you'll become friend again.
Here's our guest, I guess.
Well, his friend status will be restored if you tell us where you stand on the meatloaf argument. Pro con.
Really? I'm pro meatloaf. I'm with Stu on this one.
Gross.
I'm pro meatloaf.
Absolutely.
Oh, God.
That's good stuff.
If you make it right, first of all, don't put ketchup on it. Ketchup on
Correct.
is gross. Put anything else on.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
Okay,
catsup.
okay.
It will taste much better without that ketchup on it. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I'm somebody who can't digest mammal meats, right? But I have had meatloaf. Regrettably, I've had meatloaf. Not because it's bad, but because I have real terrible consequences for eating it, right?
That sucks.
But it does taste real good. I do like some meatloaf. When it is really well made, it's really well made.
Yeah. It has to be done good. It has to be done. It's like, I kind of equate it in some ways to ranch dressing. Like 99% of ranch dressing that I get from the store is garbage. It's awful.
Terrible.
But you got to make it. It's got to be from scratch, and then it's delicious. But don't go and get your Food Lion freaking ranch dressing like I've eaten before, because that's nasty.
So gross, right?
Nasty.
All right, so we're not here to talk about that, but I guess this does tie into meatloaf in some way. But we're going to talk about basically a cube aesthetics or flair. And before we get going, did you guys have your 37 pieces of flair? No one?
You're at 37 pieces of flair.
Nobody even gets that reference. You guys didn't watch Office Space? God, I'm wasting
No.
I haven't watched Office Space for 25
what is an Office
years.
Space?
What is an office? All right, we're going to move past that. So cube flair and cube aesthetic. So we're going to talk about the things that each one of us do in order to make our cube pop. And we want to know from the community, what do you do to make your cube pop? Like, what's your flair? What's your bling? What's your aesthetic? How do you make your cube stand out from the crowd? What's your spice? That's the questions that we're going to kind of talk about in different ways that you can approach that. And this is going to be a very open, so we got some outlines, but it's very put together as if it were a meatloaf minus the catsup. Catsup?
Minus the catsup, minus the ranch.
Roger that. All right, so let's go over some different ways that we all make our cubes feel individual. And I'd actually like to start out with, I'm going to start with the most individual cube here. And we're going to start out with the fake cube. I want to know from May, outside of the thematic, what do you do to make, what are the special things you do to make your cube pop?
So, actually, full disclosure, the whole reason I made the fake cube was because my favorite parts of Eldraine was the showcase cards. The showcase adventure cards were easily some of my most The showcase cards from Eldraine are easily some of my favorites in terms of like aesthetics, and I wanted to build a cube that supports it because it feels like it's like, especially when I first built the Fate Cube, like I had a lot of these showcase cards, but there wasn't really like a place for me to play them. So I built the entire environment solely to be able to play those cards because I'm like, hey, these are really pretty, right? So they're obviously like a real big central identity for like the environment. However, I also have like some things that grew with the identity of the cube as it started to grow and develop over time, and as it started to get its own like personality. I mentioned it, I think, in a previous episode. I couldn't tell you which one for the life of me, but I got a gift forever ago as an altar for Fairy Conclave. And I got it when it was the first time the Fate Cube got put into CubeCon, and it got put right into the Fate Cube, and it's never coming out. It's an absolutely gorgeous altar, and it's one of those cases where it's just like, this is like an incredibly unique piece of like artwork that like really adds more visual identity to it. But for the most part, like the showcases are the big draw for like the Fate Cube in particular.
And along that line, that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was the second CubeCon. And the individual that has, I believe so. Were you at the first CubeCon?
Well, it was the second ever CubeCon, but I think it was the first year that I showed up.
That's correct.
With the Fate, the first cube, the first year for the Fate Cube.
And we were both gifted these altars, and I immediately slammed my Hellraiser into my Horror Cube. That's correct. It was the second CubeCon. And it was absolutely gorgeous. It was altered by an Italian artist. It's the individual that has the fully altered cube. That kind of, I guess, correlates to what we're referring to in this episode, where that particular individual, and please forgive me, I don't have that at the top of my head right now, but that cube is completely altered, all rendered by artist, mailed out, sent back. Absolutely. I mean, it's
a gorgeous cube.
No, it's nuts.
A work of art.
It is.
And that is an aesthetic. That is the vibe they're going for. The cards themselves are still functional Magic cards. The cube is still going to play as, say, for instance, a Legacy or a Vintage cube or whatnot. That's not what that cube's about. That cube is about the visuals that you take away from that. As if you're walking, you're going to spend more time during the draft oohing and awing at the marvel of this cube opposed to the power levels of said card. And that is the flair. That is the 37 pieces plus of flair that I'm referencing.
Yeah. And I will say the showcase foils, I remember when they were first printed, and I was thinking, man, it'd be so cool to open one of these and be able to, I think I was playing a lot of Commander back in the day, so I was thinking, if I get one for a Commander deck. And I ended up opening Curious Pair, and I think it was worth about 10 cents. It was like the absolute cheapest, but I didn't have a home for it. So I think I might have passed that one over to you. Possibly.
Let's put a pause. I'm going to literally do this for our not sponsors. Let's first start out with Chris, our friend, no longer our guest, even though you like meatloaf. What are you having during this particular episode to drink?
I'm just drinking some fairly inexpensive benchmark whiskey.
All right. And the lovely May, who we miss so much. Yourself?
I'm actually not feeling particularly great today, but I am having a tea that is comprised of citrus, strawberry, and green tea.
And then Stu and I went to a local brewery with my wife, and we played this. So I love trivia. This was a disaster class for me. This is the first time that was literally ashamed. I had negative $6,300 in this Jeopardy fill in the blanks real world trivia. Was no multiple choice. Oh my God. I couldn't, you know what I actually failed at during this particular, I couldn't spell the words. Like one of the questions was, what was the capital of Iceland? I'm trying to type in Ravensjek. I can't say Ravensjek. I spell Ravensjek. Don't spell it correct enough. Minus $1,000.
Well, probably because it's Reykjavik and not Ravensjek.
Reykjavik. Well, okay. I can't spell it, let alone say it. So I'm struggling trying to get Siri to spell
Anthony,
this
your
word.
American is showing.
Yeah.
Catch up. And then it was from Edit Brewing Company, where I picked up these cold open West Coast IPAs in order to drown out the misery of the most embarrassing outing I've ever had in trivia.
Well, let me help you out then. Okay, so Reykjavik, which, as you correctly stated, is the capital of Iceland. However, if it comes up again, it is also, I believe, and someone can fact check this, I believe it is also the most northern capital in the world.
That's what they said. In addition to, one of the questions was, and I was joking with you about it, one of the categories was Russian literature.
And you made the grave mistake. Like I said,
God.
literally, all you do is you just put Dostoevsky.
And it was.
For
one of
every
the answers
answer,
was
and
Dostoevsky.
you're going to get at least one
Tolstoy.
right. Tolstoy,
yes.
exactly.
I literally kept typing them over and over again. I was like, all right, so that's our drinks for the show.
All right, well, I'm
crack 'em open.
going to crack this deliciousness.
Let's get back to this potpourri of an episode we're doing here. Potpourri, all the above. Potpourri. Doesn't really particularly matter.
Doesn't matter.
And let's talk about what we do as individuals. So I kind of want to go over these categories here of what we're looking at, and then we'll talk about it. We'll break it down. So I grouped this together. Stuff that you could do to kind of promote your cube's aesthetics. And whether or not you do it or not, that's up to you. That's kind of where this lands. Do you foil your cube? In the case of my artifact cube, it's based on robots. I want the robots to have a metallic sheen to them. That is the reason why I'm pushing the foil, the glare off of it.
But if you could choose to maybe not do that in the future, that'd be great.
We know it has its
because
we know it has its negatives.
those big overhead lights that they tend to have in the stores can make those foils a little difficult to read. So, not to say that I want to, not encourage people to put the bling on, but foiling, it can have its drawbacks.
And then we've got special treatments. These are just going to be like, we get 1,000, repeats of the same card over and over again. Functional reprints and or just reprints. At this point, I'm going to go so far as to say it used to be a lot more special. I remember, Chris, you and I were kind of in that, we were building our Power Vintage cubes at the time. It was kind of special for you and I to have this identity of our two cubes, not from the cubes, what they played, but almost the art style. Do you remember you and I talking about that, where I'm chasing the Friday Night Magic and you're chasing the old border?
Right, yeah, because I'm just a lover of the retro border, old border, anything alpha beta or forward, from that old style I really like. So,
and that's kind of the flavor, the visual flavor of it. Both the cubes play in a similar vein. It's not about that. It's more about It's a different level of experience when you're opening up packs and you're looking at them. Either they're foiled or they're special treatment, or in the case of, say, like Dragons of Winter's Night, where the dragons are intentionally full art. So they stand out from the crowd when he can do that. That's our good friend Chill MTG.
Yep.
That he can make those pop to you. And that's a neat little flair piece to do, something to think about. Like, I want this card to be different or to be important or to pop or for you to notice it. Right?
I will out myself as well if, we're ever drafting, certainly in paper, if it's a cube that we're not super familiar with, that I will definitely force white border wherever possible. I'm a big fan of white border for some reason. I've been called a heretic and various other names I cannot mention again. I love the white border cards. I purposely, for a long time, when I was building EDH decks, I literally put all the lands as white border.
Let's talk about that then. Let's pause on the white border thing. I'm going to ask each one of you. Actually, I'm going to ask May and I'm going to ask Chris. I'll tell you, I like white borders when they're with other white borders. I do not find it visually appealing when they're mixed in with black borders. How do you feel about that? To me, it's like a visual thing. Does that even faze you?
It depends. So I think that there are a lot of cards that you could intentionally exclude yourself from in terms of like functionality. If you're like cutting yourself off from white border cards, sometimes it's just a matter of like what people have in their collection. However, there's also cases like Strands of Night in the Fey Cube, right? Strands of Night is a particularly like niche card in the Fey Cube, but it's a white border card in there. It's not like, how do I put it? So it's not like the other bombier cards in that like environment. It's not a card that's going to stick out like a lot, but the fact that it's white border is enough to like grab attention. It sticks out. It gets the gears turning, right? And like that's a visual choice, right? I could throw in literally any other better reanimate card there, but I chose Strands of Night. And the fact that it's white border adds kind of that visual identity and that kind of visual cue. And I think that like that's kind of a subtle cue that like actually kind of helps it.
I think that would be cool. Like, I would love for that to be maybe something that I introduce in one of my cubes, is that I pick some of those, like, key pieces, right? Key engine pieces, key payoffs. And at every opportunity, if there's a white border printing, just make sure that that's the one in the cube. Like, I want those to stand out outside of just some of the other, maybe, dare I say, generic cards that could be in black border.
I remember specifically, Chris, this was a conversation you and I had well before the show, back to the Powered Vintage, how you were through attrition phasing them out where you could. Is that correct? As in
I was, although I just, there's only, now I don't run hardly any white borders in anything. There's only one cube, the Power Vintage cube, that has white borders in it, because that's the only version of those dual lands I have are white border. So they stick out, but that's the only, like, my revised duals are in there now, because I don't play Commander anymore, hardly. So here I got no other place to put them. So
apparently we can just print anything we want in the Commander World universe anyways. Why be bothered? But that was a little bit of a jab. But what I'm trying to say along that too is instead of replacing the cards, I opted to buy inner sleeves that had a blacked out box around them, and I used those to slide over my gold border cards. Used them for some silver border cards and some white border cards, not because I'm opposed to any of those. I'm not. It's more of, it was a visual, like, it did not appeal to me when I'm flicking through packs to see a one-off, opposed to what May's saying with the Strands of Night. Me, it's a different vibe for how I perceive that when I'm going through cards. It doesn't change the function of the card in any way.
Yeah, but it also could be that you don't want cards. Like, there could be a sort of, is the drafter thinking that there's some kind of subliminal message there, or that you are trying to purposely make cards stand out if you do have such a different finish on the card, right? White border versus a different art.
Let me put it to you this way, right? When you think of white border, there's a certain amount of, like, almost recoil that you get to it. There's a sort of, like, jank feeling to it. Like, there's almost like weird feeling that you get when you see, like, a bunch of black border cards, and then suddenly there's, like, a white border card in there, right? Suddenly it gets you thinking about it. But that's kind of like the appeal of it, right? And that's kind of like why I went for it.
Yep.
Chris?
Yeah, to go back to we were talking about phasing out white borders. I went so far as to order, like, altar sleeves too.
Right.
Like, you're talking about the sleeves that put the black border around it. I actually, like, for a Wheel of Fortune, I bought an altar sleeve, and it looks really nice, but it gets rid of that white border. So that was my way of doing that without having to spend, several $1,000s.
You know what? You're right. And I did that. Now that you're saying that, I did the same thing. I forgot about that. I used altar sleeves. And that's another aesthetic thing. I did that with my metalworker. I did that with bribery, if I'm not mistaken. I did that with Wheel of Fortune. You're right. I totally forgot about Ultra Sleeves. Ultra Sleeves is a great product. We used to be affiliated with them, no longer, but it was a great product. And they're about $6 each. I forgot about that. That gives some serious flair and pop. So you should check out Ultra Sleeves. It's a really good company. And then
it's fantastic. It really helps. Yeah, it really helps make cards that maybe don't have a foil, or the foil is, like, so expensive. Like Grim Monolith or something like that.
Right.
So, you can actually get something that looks cool and still have the real card, but not alter it permanently if you don't want
still have cards like my Ulamog and all that, where it actually finishes the art, takes it all the way to the edge. These are artists that are working. It's a really neat process they use there. And they work within that to extend the art or to modify the art. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. It was really great. Let's go back to the white border, back to the pop and flair of that dumpster fire cube we have. Even though we know that's all jank, and we did that as a community build, check out those episodes, and we're have to play that again soon and refine it.
I was going to say, it's been too long,
but we put all white borders in there with intent. That was almost like the running gag, because they are kind of
was
pretty.
it though, or was it just because everyone's thinking, man, I do not want these janky, gross white border cards. I've took them out of my EDH decks, and now I just need, and some idiots, aka these guys that do this podcast, have asked for cards for this cube. Heck yeah, here's a bunch of white border cards. Please take them from me, or they'll end up on the bonfire.
The gag reel is, aesthetically, when they're all together, they're quite beautiful. The art that's on those old cards is gorgeous anyways.
Consistency is key.
And then all that white, it doesn't detract.
I supplied all the basics for that. I think they're all white border basics. I'm pretty sure I gave you all of them.
That's correct. And then no way detract from the cube. They actually are kind of neat looking in hand. It's different because it's kind of a quantity at that point. You know
what's funny, Chris, saying about basics? I don't know if you remember many, many, many years ago when before Cube was kind of the de facto and we were still playing Commander, but I expressed this love that I had for the white Borderlands, and I distinctly remember you saying, like, oh, Stu, I've got a ton of those white Borderlands. If you're looking for basics for your Commander decks, I'll be happy to furnish you with as many as you like. I was like, oh, absolutely, man. Thank you. I've still got boxes of them, like, or at least a box with a bunch of basics in. So
I've still got a ton of those damn things. I got rid of like 30 or 40 each for that dumpster fire cube, and I actually sorted them by art, like 5 of each art or something like that.
nice.
And I gave them each. I was able to do that on like 4th edition, 5th edition, some 7th edition, maybe some, whatever. I had a whole bunch, so I just gave up. I was like, here you go. Have as many as you want.
It's time to start making the white border basic lands great again. Let's jack the value. Chris needs some more money in his 401k.
I think they look good in
That would be
quantity.
lovely.
So another one too that's kind of come out, and this is more of a recent, this has happened, is another flair thing you can do is people add like emblems or some sort of game rules modification. That's not a visual flair, that's a recontextualization of that environment that can provide like an overarching flair. Do you guys agree with what I'm saying? A mod that makes the game feel different.
I think this is outside of the aesthetics conversation. It's not a
curation beauty point.
I think
it's a mental kind of change of the environment, a recontextualization.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about adjusting cards, like the actual way that they function, I think that's outside of just the aesthetics. But there are, like, we've drafted bar cubes where they've literally just taken Sharpies and Sharpied through words that are on the cards. That has
an aesthetic change.
That is an aesthetic change to the card, no doubt about it. But it also does have a dramatic effect on the cube. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's a modification of the function, but it visually changes the static appearance of the card, and then ergo changes how the game is played. Whereas the artist doesn't change how the card functions.
No.
Aesthetically changes it and makes it so that you're walking through a museum.
And I enjoy the vibe. The whole bar cube thing was fun. We did it when we were at CubeCon. We've done it in at our place. We've done it at other events. I will say that that's one thing that, as much as I enjoy the bar cube vibe, I feel like that was something that, and maybe it was just because it was late and, we were playing at a bar, but not that I'm traditionalist with the way that I want the Magic cards to function, but it just maybe added a layer that I wasn't quite ready for at that time. And so as much as I support that as like a cool vibe for a cube, that I think can just as a modification can potentially be detrimental to the experience.
So, May, outside of, I guess, we talked about the showcase cards you're using, the Eldraines and whatnot, and the fake cube's not your only cube, but what other approaches do you do to, I guess, while I'm flipping through the cards, I'm drafting, how do you draw me in as a drafter so I ooh and ah? Like, what's the thing you go for?
So we already kind of mentioned foiling. Another aspect of that is also promo printings. It's not always just a matter of it just being shiny cardboard, but just like alternate printings of it. Typically, when I am trying to make a card pop out, then I will sometimes go for like borderless whatnot. But it's hard because, like with the fake cube in particular, a lot of that comes from me trying to pick certain printings for flavor reasons or like artistic reasons rather than solely because of, I guess, the subconscious degree of information. Like Strands of Night, it's an intentional thing of, hey, this is a whiteboard card, it's attention grabbing, right? But something like Thought Scour, for example, where it's like, this is a borderless art where it has like a bunch of fairies, an example, that just happens to be the only printing of that card that happens to reference fairies, right? It doesn't make that card any particularly more special or poppy or whatnot. However, I do want to derail the conversation a little bit because there is an innate downside to having it kind of mixed and matched to a degree. For example, I have like a lot of the Strixhaven archive cards, and it can lead to actually a little bit of, I don't want to say drafting fatigue as much as that it can really hinder newer players' ability to quickly identify cards. Like if you're trying to quickly riffle through a pack, it can be sometimes easy to overlook certain cards that are certain color identities or whatnot because they are in certain printings.
I agree wholly.
And that could be a downside.
That is what Stu was talking about, even with the downside of the foiling of the artifact cube and the light is glaring in your eyes. The same can hold true where we're doing these different treatments where I know this is Ponder It just doesn't look like the Ponder I know. And that may change how people see cards, and that's a simple Magic card. And we're going to talk about some other simple ones here very soon. But there is a pro and con to this flair idea, this aesthetics, and you have to kind of know. I guess ultimately you need to know who your target audience is, right?
That point that you made right there is so key, right? So one of the treatments that's very popular, understandably, is like the full art cards, and you've got cards that literally have no text box on them at all. And I will say I am not a big fan of cards that don't have the explanation of what the card does on it. You could make the argument that some of the incredibly iconic cards, I think Ponder, Brainstorm, things like that, okay, fair enough. The majority of players are going to be familiar enough with those cards, and even a new player, if you just say, this is Brainstorm, you draw 3 and then you put 2 cards back. That's all the card does. Okay, that's relatively straightforward. But I feel like once the complexity of the card increases, then having no text or text that's difficult to read, it doesn't have to be even the full art cards with no text boxes on them. There's some of them that have got like, it's not your traditional art at the top, text on the bottom in a box with the nice, easy to read font. Some of them have got these crazy pieces of art and fonts that try to explain what the card does. And to me, it's not a net positive. And certainly I would argue for new players, it can be incredibly a negative for them trying to learn the cube and what the cards do.
Now, interestingly enough, and we're really focusing on cards in play right now, we've kind of bled over into accessibility meets flair, right?
I think you have to.
That's the direction
I think those conversations go hand in hand, right? You want your cube to be new player friendly as much as you want it to be friendly, unless, like, I've built this cube because it's going to be played by 8 players who've played the game for 25 years. Okay, fine. Then you can get away kind of with whatever treatment that you want. But that's not always the case.
So I've got a card in the Artifact Cube, and I bring this up for a reason, because I do this. And this card is Cyberman Patrol, and for 2 colorless artifact creature Cyberman, it's a Doctor Who card. And at the bottom, I have the full art treatment. And the reason why I have it is because aesthetically, I do not like the normal reading of the card. I just don't like the art on the actual card I should have, that players have said, Anthony, why don't you have this? Because the question that comes up says, artifact creatures you control have afflict 3. And that's not an evergreen mechanic. Like, I know, and our play group knows what afflict means because I play a commander deck that everybody hates, and it's Neheb that thrives off this idea.
I love that deck.
Well, that's the only reason why we know as a group. This is not an aesthetic thing, but it is. I've chosen the full art because I like the way this card looks in foil. It will come up, and it has come up during Uber Cubathon that weekend. Everybody's passing around the card. I think it was our good friend Chill that says, hey, Anthony, this is a really cool looking card. What the hell's Afflict 3?
Afflict is not a common mechanic.
It's not.
By any stretch. Like, I can't think of 5 cards that I could name off the top of my head that have it. So it's not just that card has Afflict. What does that mean? And then you have to explain the rule. It's then, how many times during the course of a game is it going to come up where potentially a newer player says, oh, hang on a second, what is that Afflict again? And what does that mean? And how does it impact this board state? Like, yeah,
so
it can be...
Chris and May, what I have done is, by virtue, I have crossed that threshold of aesthetics, and now I've kind of accosted the idea of accessibility, right?
Yeah, I had the same thing happen recently at one of the Uber Cubathons. It was one of my foil treatments of a retro border foil treatment of a card that has Dredge on it. Well, that card just says Dredge a number with no reminder text. And I had someone have to ask me, what the heck does Dredge 3 mean? Kind of thing. And it's like, it was Life from the Loam or something like that. And it came up at the first Uber Cubathon. I remember that specifically. And yeah, I had the same thing. We had to answer that question, because we had a newer player who was playing my cube.
The interesting little tie off to this is and I don't want to go down this road of accessibility. We'll talk about that in another episode, but that is sometimes a cost of the aesthetics that you're inserting into your environment. It does come at a cost. Let's kind of move over to something else you can do that I think we all kind of do in our own ways when we're building our cubes. Let me ask you a question. May, I'm going to start out with you, and then I'll follow up with Chris. How important are your basic lands in your cube environment? What do they mean to you from a flair perspective?
Oh, it was such a huge deal when I finally got like a set of Lorwyn lands, like 50 of each Lorwyn lands, and that was like such a huge deal for the Fake Cube because it sets like such a tone difference when people have like it doesn't seem like something that people are really going to think of much until you like actually have like a pile of like cards of like from like the same plane or like from like the same kind of like aesthetic tone, right? And then all of a sudden it feels like you're playing an environment rather than just this is just a pile of cards.
There's purpose to it. There's a thought process, right? It's meaningful. It's not just a, hey, this card might have an art style that fits the cube. It's now the players can look at a hand that has 3 of the same land in it. Let's just argue, right? I drafted a mono red deck and I pull my deck, 7 cards. I've got 3 basic lands. I know instantly, right, there's my basic lands. All right, perfect. And then I've got the other 4 cards are my action cards, right? It simplifies things. This is the way I've always looked at it. And I have played cubes that have got mismatched lands. And I am not the smartest guy at the best of times. And if I'm at least trying to play the best Magic that I can, I don't need distractions like that. They don't do anything for me.
I'm going to go ahead and say that too. Mismatched lands are an aesthetic. They are. And I've seen some, I mean, our good friend Brian Sensi, and Sam have these tricked out, gorgeous cubes where all the lands are different. Absolutely stunning. You are walking through a museum of basic land art that's quite possibly some of the greatest art in all of Magic's history is actually on the basic lands.
Yes.
The stories are on the lands.
I feel like lands are a little underappreciated.
They are. The planes, everything.
Are absolutely appropriate.
Oh, yeah. Everything about all the planes. Now, but here's what's interesting. Let's do this for a minute. Let's go a little meta. So, Uberbear's Artifact Cube. And we're going to talk about yours in a minute. I chose the mech lands, and that's what I call them, from Brothers War. They literally have mech juggernauts. I could not have had anything more perfect to bring that cube together. Prior, I had Kaladesh lands, which were equally as gorgeous, but it was like an inventor's fair. But something about the mechs versus the well-groomed crops, which are definitely done by machines, it's just a whole aesthetic flair. Now go into the idea of, and I said our good friend Brian, our good friend Sam, their cubes are multiversal, which is the game of Magic. They are actually probably more on the nose when they're doing a legacy cube. That's kind of what I'm trying to say here versus the thematic environment where I'm choosing a land to prop up that story, like in the Fake Cube. Whereas the others they're just an array of all the cards that you could literally pull from, I don't know, we'll say the strongest or whatever you want, right? To insert card.
More power.
But now
focused.
You're representing the entire planes of Magic, which is
the whole multiverse.
That's an interesting idea, right? And you've done this through your storytelling on the lands.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, I think that's exactly on the nose with what I think that they're trying to achieve. For me, I'm with Stu. I like the lands to match. That's just me. I went through and like for my power cube, I collected old border foils of like invasion basics.
We joked about this last
took
night.
a while to collect.
Your quest. How long did your quest? Like I said, you were on your belly, very like a certain South Park episode that came out recently with a certain person dragging in the sand. That's what I pictured you were doing, trying to get all these lands from all the various vendors.
It took about 6 months of troll. I'm sure I helped the price go up on certain sites for these lands, and but yeah, it took a while. And but first of all, for me, I don't like full art lands. I'm just gonna say right now, there's only one full art land I like, and that's from Unglued, and that's it. And they're very expensive.
You don't like my mech lands, bro, and you like Meatloaf. Okay, all right. This is why you're a guest.
Your mech lands are fine. For my cubes, no. But old border rules over everything for me. I really like the old border lands.
I bet he likes mech.
But for like my peasant and pauper, I had to make concessions for price purposes because they can get expensive. So but I got 40 of each land for each, and they're all foil. They're all the same art. The only ones that don't really match are my Sultai cube. I got a bunch of Urza Saga lands for that. They're not foil, but I think they look nice.
But it was something about like this Easter egg hunt that you were doing. And I know we're talking about basic lands or not, but this is an aesthetic like virtue of a cube. Whether you're mismatching through intent, which I dig, but I do agree that there's accessibility problems. I make a lot of play errors when I'm looking at a card that's slightly tinted blue and it's actually a swamp. I'm not going to lie. I will misplay. I have to group them. It is a thing, but that's a whole different topic. But then that quest of actually trying to procure each one of these cards is its own thing. Like trying to go through all these various vendors, it's kind of can be fun if you allow it to slow bleed. I did this with my Power Vintage Cube. I don't do the multiversal thing. I don't do all that. Actually, one of my favorite artists of all time is Mark Poole. And when I saw the Shooting Star lands that were in some kind of weird little random gift pack that made no sense, where they give you one of each. I remember this being like the strangest little bonus nonsense, like Welcome to Magic, but you can actually play Magic with this little pack. But I saw this, like they laid them out in this weird kind of fanned out Wooburg order of these cards, and I walked into a LGS somewhere in the great state of Alabama. As a matter of fact, it was New Hope, Alabama, and I got a whole story about that one. Traded a guy a wasteland for a taiga, great guy, but I think I came out ahead in the aftermath there. But when I saw these lands pop behind that counter, I'm like, ooh, I gotta have these. And I remember your quest chasing down those lands, and it was like 6 months, and I'm like, oh my God, do I have to drag my belly through the sand trying to find these? And I was able to find each one of them in groups of, it was funny because they're sold only of one-ofs in this gift pack by Mark Poole. So my quest didn't take as long as yours because I paid a lot more money to expedite them.
I was going to say, anything can be done quickly if you're willing to spend the money.
Yeah, through the great mechanism of capitalism, I was like, oh my God, this is so stupid. I remember you bleeding it though, and it looked like you were having more fun than I was, and I was racing you. And then we were joking about this just last night, and then insert the conversation with Sam, and you went, shut up, Anthony. You don't even know what it's like. Like, Sam has procured all these artist-signed proofs of each individual back to the multiversal concept, and that lays in his cube so well. And we have talked about basic lands as aesthetic pop for way too long, but I think it's an interesting topic.
I think it's the one thing that's the most consistent. I think it's the most consistent element.
Every cube has them. Even the desert cubes have them, so it's like they're not separate, but still, and that's all a conscious decision for the curator, and I think it's fantastic. I love when someone actually takes the time to care about what their basic lands are. It means to me that they actually care about their cube. If you just throw in a whole bunch of basics, mismatched basics from your basic pile, I don't think you care as much.
I'm gonna get all that hate mail. Please send that to Chris at gmail.com. Chris likes meatloaf.
I'm gonna fall on the sword a little bit though. I'm going to agree. I think it shows just an additional layer of care about the aesthetic of the cube. I really do, and I think that it doesn't always have to be that you're, particular about a particular set or a particular theme. Sometimes it could just be, I want them to all be the same because I believe there will be a non-zero number of players who will enjoy the fact that their basics are consistent. And let's face it.
I am going to defend. And May, I want your help on this one.
Let's face it.
As we're talking
hang on.
We are in privileged position to have this conversation.
We are. But, that was going to be my next point.
It's true.
It's a very fortunate position to be in, to be able to match the lands. However, lands are cheap, right? So lands are cheap. Basic lands are cheap.
Not if you're in the quest.
Well, let's face it. If you're trying to buy, if you're trying to get all unglued, all of a very particular expensive land, it can get expensive. But just matching 35, 40, whatever basic lands for the cube is not difficult and is very cheap.
So May,
they don't have to be foiled. I don't care if they're foiled.
Yeah.
May, tie us off so eloquently as you do, please.
Well, I mean, my addition to the land conversation is just like I was actually given a lot of my Lorwyn lands, because part of the quest was actually me reaching out to a lot of the cube community, being like, "Hey, I'm looking for these particular kinds of lands," and then people reaching out back, being like, "Yeah, I have a bunch of these. How many do you need?" And that's where I ended up with a bunch of them.
Did everybody hear that? Actually, I love that you said that. That would be a thing. If listeners are looking for a certain type of basic land, that would be and I've got one or twosies of them. I have zero problems with sticking them in the mail and putting a stamp on it. That's actually cool.
Same.
I dig. what
Okay,
you said
hang
there.
on.
I have boxes of stupid draft chaff.
So basically, what we need to do
That's actually kind of
is we need to set up a channel in our Discord, basic land swap, and if anyone or basic land needs, and if
spicy.
anyone
So
is
there-
looking for specific basic lands from a set.
or bacon. You said
Or
bacon.
bacon or basic.
Don't
well,
put bacon in the
if
mail,
you're
please.
sending someone some basic lands, they should send you some bacon in return. Is what I'm saying there. But yeah, absolutely.
Rancid
if you're looking
bacon
for some
in the mail.
rancid bacon.
Please bubble wrap your bacon,
No
please.
refrigeration.
No.
Just send it.
All these cards are foiled from bacon grease now, not from.
No. The bacon has to be in one of those coolers that they send kidneys in across the country or something.
I
like
actually
that. I don't
dig that idea. Now that does have a little bit of like air quotes doxing. I get all that. We can. I don't know. We'll solve this when we get there. That's probably a PO box type thing, but I think it's a neat concept. So I'm willing to discuss that. Let's kind of change from a different aesthetic value. Let's move over to something entirely different. Let's talk about the sleeves. The physical sleeves. How much, May and Chris, do the sleeves matter to the virtue, the aesthetics, the flair of the cube?
So I'm gonna be frank with you. Sleeves can get expensive, and I do not have a ton of money to throw around. So I went for whatever sleeves that were like the most replaceable. That I don't care if they get broken, because like let's be real. Even though like sure, I would love to be able to just sleeve up an entire cube with Dragon Shield, right? That would be really expensive though, right? The reality is that it's much better to have like a $5 set of sleeves that you can fill out like, and you have like 100 extra just sitting around, and so that way they will break, right? And you will have to count on them breaking. So aesthetics of your sleeves becomes a lot less important the more that you start to use your cards, right? As far as the inner sleeves, though, that's when you can start getting a little bit more creative, because a lot of the inner sleeves is when you can get with I forgot what it's called, but like those alter inner sleeves, right?
Yep.
And those ones are really nice. So
I love those. Yep, I use those too. And as far as sleeves go, I would agree. But just depends on your budget. Honestly, for sleeves, I'm gonna go with May on that one. It really
I think
depends on
I
your budget.
wholeheartedly agree. Don't let these conversations that we're talking about. I mean, I don't know. This is disposable income. I mean, let's don't play around with what we're talking about.
Luxury item,
It is what it
Luxury
is. It's a luxury item. You can call it that. I mean, you're spending money on something. I don't care. Foils, full art treatments, all of it, be damned, right? I mean, let's be real. Not everybody can do this. People are dealing with what they deal with every day, and this is not important to them. Penny sleeves, I don't mind. I have zero. I think there's a certain amount of aesthetic, frankly. If someone said, hey, draft my cube that's not sleeved, there's an aesthetic. It is, because it's a vibe built around the idea of it. It does, again, changes. It doesn't change what the cards do. It changes, I guess, the vibe of the cube. Say Andy Mangle's neoclassical cube. Or in the case of R2 bar cubes, it changes the vibe of the cube, not the worth of the cards.
Cubes being
about what the card's
unsleeved
function
is part
is.
of the vibe.
It's
right?
the vibe. So it's an aesthetic portion of it. The fact that it's not sleeved is part of the visual appearance of the card.
And look, I'm someone who doesn't own a gigantic collection, right? So you can imagine, for card acquisition purposes, if someone has been playing Magic for a long time, played a ton of limited, plays a ton of standard over the years or whatever, maybe you've got a pretty decent sized collection. I'm not in that position. So if I wanted to build even a 360 card cube and I've got to buy all the cards, now you're starting to rack up the cost pretty quickly. And I'm holding in my hand right now, this was something I got. It was on sale. I'm pretty sure I got it from Amazon. The brand is Mlikero, Mlikero. This is a 500 sleeves right here. So that's 360 cards for the cube and then a bunch of basic lands. And I want to say I paid like $10 or $12 for this. And this is what the Diablo cube is going to go in, right? I want to be cheap. I want to try and, well, not when I say cheap, I want to try and, keep the cost down. This is something that is going to enable me to do that. And I agree with May. Dragon Shield that can get expensive. Even a box of 100 can get pricey. But when you start thinking about the cube and the lands and, anything else, having some spares for when they get broken, that can get expensive real fast.
But now we've leaned into the aesthetic, air quotes, financial investment, like it, love it, or leave it, of the cards, as we have went to this trouble to procure this museum, right? We've built this museum. And just like any museum that has to maintain temperature and humidity and dew point in order to maintain the pieces of art that you've put into said fine arts museum, when you've walked this path of, I guess, you
have an in-paper vintage cube, you need to have good sleeves to protect your stuff. You should have inner sleeves. You should have good sleeves. It should be enough to protect your stuff.
There's no argument there.
However, if your vintage cube is proxied, you should probably just go for whatever cheap sleeves that just need to be rotated.
And so now we've crossed the line. It's interesting. Now we've blended in accessibility into the idea of aesthetics, into
its practicality,
the practicality and affordability of said aesthetics, which is interesting all in itself, right? And what makes a cube a cube. Another one that I thought was interesting, besides the no sleeves and the color, right? And this one, I'm going to change after CubeCon, but the Fem Cube is all pink, which, in retrospect, I'm going to change that. That's not the vibe that I'm looking for. Not that anything's new, but originally, I don't know, my lizard brain was kind of functioning, and I thought, this kind of projects this idea of what I'm trying to do, but ultimately, the cube's not about the color sleeves, it's about the art that's in said cube, right? It's kind of sending a mixed message in that idea of aesthetics. Do you agree or disagree with that statement I said?
I agree.
Right. So I will mod
the color
that.
itself doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, so for now, please forgive me. They aren't currently like these weird fuchsia-looking colored sleeves, but as I've grown...
I like fuchsia, so...
I was going to say, I don't think that is something that I think you need to change.
I don't think anybody's going to be upset.
No, they are beautifully colored.
I've thought about this aesthetic on a meta level more than anything else, right? We can go back to the historical reference of pink versus blue. This was a Mattel decision. At one point, historically, pink was a color that boys were taking pictures of, even though they're black and white, but when they highlighted them. But then when Mattel came out and you had Ken and Barbie, this is where all this happened. You see where this is all happening, right? And as goofy as that is, I want to move past that. The cube is bigger than that.
That makes sense.
Right? And that's an aesthetic thing. Yeah. Please don't boycott my cube at CubeCon. I'm just not going to... Back to the affordability, I can't afford to currently re-sleeve this entire cube. But it is something that's been on the back of my mind that I was like, going to do a silver. The color doesn't matter. I just want to do something kind of cool and poppy, right? But I wanted to make it at the time, make it different. And there is a negative aspect of having like pink and fuchsia and all that. Colors do shine through the backs of the cards, but none of that matters.
Yep. That I would say is the disadvantage.
It's a disadvantage, but it is an aesthetic virtue that the choice of the color is representative of what you're trying to vibe out, right? That's part of the museum. That's an aesthetic choice that you have made. In the case of the artifact cube, I've chose this copper color. I didn't really want a silver. I wanted a bronzy color. I wanted something that said, the equivalent of Browntown artifacts, right? And as I'm putting the metallic sheen of the foils, it's metal. As weird as no one's going to see that except for me as the curator in the final product, but I think it's an interesting dynamic of designing a cube.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
Let's talk about another aesthetic thing. And this is going back and forth, whether or not it's a shoebox covered in stickers, or you've got one of those long white containers to put your cube in, or you've bought, like I have my horror cube in the Wizard's Foundry Grimoire, because it looks like a spell book. They've discontinued those since, but it looks really neat. The storage container can be a vibe.
I think not just that it can be a vibe, it is a vibe. I think we've probably already gone down enough of the lane of accessibility, because you can really go ham sandwiches on a really fancy box storage container that you use to transport and carry your cube around in. You can be cheap, you can be expensive. Same with your sleeve, same with your basic lands. But
my bar cube sits in a cardboard box, while my fake cube sits in a quiver.
Yeah,
right. There is
cool.
a very distinct difference in the way that I present those.
Yeah, but that
There's-
grimoire,
you can
was
you can
awesome.
have boxes that are they're just made. You can buy them off of Etsy that are handmade. These really cool handmade wooden laser etched things, kind of thing. Or you go with the Game Genic stuff. Or you go with the plain
Look, if I
cardboard
had
box.
throwaway funds, I would absolutely throw the fake cube in like a fancy custom box.
Oh hell yeah! It would look awesome. It would look awesome, and I love those. It's just they're very expensive usually if you want the good ones.
There was
And
an
they take forever to get made.
individual that it was on the internet passing around Reddits and whatnot for a while that had some kind of Innistrad horror type cube. But the cube, when you open it up, was like a gothic leather satchel. You're opening it up, and it is literally a vampire's hunter's toolkit. It had like I guess, a hardbound log in it. It had a stake in it. Literally had a cross in it.
Crossbow.
It was velvet lined. It was like as if Van Helsing was opening up a hunt box, but the inside was the cube, almost in coffin. It's really interesting to see that. I remember that going around the internet. You want to talk about taking an aesthetic to the max? Is the physical properties of the box was telling the story before you've even looked at a card. That, well, this person could be a crazy serial killer, or or this is the sweetest Innistrad cube you've ever seen in your life. But I remember seeing that, and I'm like, holy cow. And now that was something that they bought an old briefcase for. They ripped out the inners. They went ahead and put inside of it, said, let's just say velvet lining. They took all this time. They tore pages out and used those to wrap things. It was really nuts. And the time that this person, I can only imagine seeing that drop in your LGS and like, oh my God, I'm playing Cube with Van Helsing. It was insane, right? Like,
I mean,
that's
someone
an
pulls
aesthetic.
up with that, and I'm like, yeah, I don't care what's
I don't
in
care
there.
what's in there.
If you're offering me a gameplay experience that starts with that, I'm down.
That's full immersion through aesthetics, which is wild. And you don't have to, the way it looked is they don't like they spend a lot of money. They spend a lot of time. They procured these components. You could flea market this idea out and then build it over time. Or if you go get a custom sanded, like our good friend Christian made us these beautiful little slide, perfect fit boxes that he literally put. And I mean, they have no seams. It is dovetail, wood locked, wood glued, absolutely gorgeous. Unfortunately, it's just a micron too short to actually fit a Magic card in with a sleeve on.
It is, yeah.
It is the
But
most
they're beautiful.
stunning looking cases. I mean, he handcrafted these for Christmas one year. And something about that is so special to put a cube in. It's not so much even that it promotes joy from people when you bring this box. It's more of what you internalize, the pride that, say, May or Chris gets with this idea of, I took the time, even with the shoebox, to cover this in my favorite, let's say, brewery stickers, right? I mean, you took the time to procure this, and it is an aesthetic, it is a vibe, even if it's your own individual worth of the cube.
I totally agree.
Yes.
That kind of time and effort put into something like that is incredible. It is. Again, it's like I said with the basic lands. It shows you care, and it really, really adds a lot to the experience.
Good promotion as well. Like if you're showing up at an LGS or you're showing up and you're like, hey, I've got something. Would you guys be willing to, try out this new experience that I would like to present to you? And then they say, oh, I don't know what you got. And you pull that out. Like that is promotion as well as just the aesthetics of the cube. That is incredible.
Another aesthetic thing that I do is when the separators that I use in all my cubes, I use the hard cased. I guess everybody gets them. Whenever you order cards, I don't care. It could be, let's just say, Star City or Card Kingdom or TCG or coolcards.inc. I don't care. You always get these really weird, hard, like, I guess everybody uses them for the commanders, but you can use those as spacers between, say, your basic lands and whatnot. And what I do in the FEM and in the horror and, well, heck, the artifact cube is I take some cards that aren't necessarily in the cube, but I still want to represent the art that's provided inside that, in that environment. And I'll put two of them in there, one facing out, one facing left, right. And I'll use that as dividers in my cube. Not that people ever take the time to look at it, but I have, by choice, picked those cards because I think they're neat looking art, but maybe they weren't good enough to be playable in said cube. But it's a neat little flair thing that I do in my cubes, a little Easter egg, right? So take the time to look at that at CubeCon. Or don't, but
I won't. But I like that you're doing that.
But they are there.
That's cool.
Yeah, that sounds similar to something that I do with mine. I use remember those old gift boxes that we used to get years and years and years ago. They came with little packages of dividers. These little plastic dividers. They all look like kind of like a basic land or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah,
exactly.
they're really neat.
But those are my separators that I use for like my basic lands. I still have a bunch of them from like years ago. And they haven't produced that product in how long? It's been almost a decade now, it feels like.
Yeah.
And
Kaladesh, I think, might have been the last one that did it, the gift box for Christmas.
I honestly don't know, but it was a long time ago. And but it was really I use those and they're really fantastic. And
And it brings you personal joy. Maybe nobody stops and takes the time to go, oh, man, your dividers are really neat, right? I know I've never had that conversation, but it is something that is part of, we've talked about the cards and the ones you've chosen. We've talked about your art choices, your treatments. We've talked about your sleeve choices. Now we're talking about your storage. Now we're talking about your spacers. It's all part of the entire aesthetics and vibe of the cube and how you can do this over time. This can be piecemealed over years, right? Or, get your friends to contribute. Like, we're going to need some cards for your Diablo cube that we have to put together, but you also want some aesthetical pieces.
Did you bring them? Did you look at the list and bring the cards?
No, I never even read that card, or read that cube, but I will eventually get down to reading that cube. But let's kind of move over to let's kind of wrap this up with some aesthetic pieces. I want to talk about a specific card. We're going to kind of end on this. The card Lightning Bolt has a ton of reprintings, like a lot. A lot. And we have our original, absolutely gorgeous Alpha Beta Christopher Rush. I mean, it is the favorite. Iconic. It's gorgeous, right? It's stunning. But, and I don't mean a but here, but maybe you're into that old kind of, I guess, the card's so simple. It's so gorgeous. Matter of fact, I watched Aristic Studies recently with Sam talking about Lightning Bolt and how spectacular the art is and how simplistic and how it represents kind of, I guess, the spearhead of Magic. It is the point card of introductory of the idea of Magic. Every card kind of warps around the idea of Lightning Bolt being symbolic to the idea of the game in which we play. Now, that makes this card...
It's such an easy card to understand. It's such an easy card to use. It is a great example of a card like that.
So now we've got accessibility, and now we can do aesthetics, and we can kind of do affordability with the different treatments. We can kind of tie all this together. Now, there's so many options now, and this is a pro and a con of the idea of the universes beyond and the swath of cards we get slammed with. Every podcast, every video talks about it's spoiler season, all right? But it does allow us as cube curators to now cherry pick the individual card treatments that we want that fit that aesthetic of that environment, make it pop. So the first one we talked about is Christopher Rush, which it's the undisputable champion at this point. It's just the most simple, gorgeous, nothing going on.
It's a ball to lightning.
I mean, it's perfect.
It is.
But we could change it up. There's one that I'm looking at, and it's by Alexis Zarit. I think I got that right. And it's a Secret Lair. And it's kind of busy. It's a very busy card. I'm not going to lie to you. And I'll include this in the show notes. But what's interesting and what's calling me about this card is in my horror cube, I want to fit an aesthetic. I want to fit the theme. And I'm trying to decide if I want this card versus the other arts that I have in there currently. Lightning Bolt's a powerful card. May has said that it should always belong in every cube, right, May? May's
putting Legos in your shoes as we speak.
But in this particular art, it is a full art version of it. It is busy. But at the top of the storm cloud, there is a skeleton. It's like doom coming. It's evil. And the bolt is coming. It's hard to tell that it's a bolt, but something's getting fried and skeletal at the base. I was debating whether or not this was scary enough to add to my cube, to add to the aesthetic.
I think this art treatment on Lightning Bolt is pretty sick. It is a full art. It does have the text box. Lightning Bolt has the advantage of, because the card is so simple, you can get away with having a full art, but the text box also contains the Lightning Bolt deals 3 damage to any target. So it's got that kind of going for it. And I think for a horror cube where you've got skeletons and zombies and stuff like that, and this card does have like a skeleton shaman with this skull in the clouds or whatever it is, right? It's a very, very cool piece of art. And I think if you were ever going to, especially for someone like yourself, you've probably got lightning bolt in more than one of your cubes.
Do.
So you can have this as kind of a separator. Would this art go in every cube and fit the theme? Probably not.
That's back
but
to the
would
point.
this card go in that horror cube and
Yes.
separate itself from all the other lightning bolts just in your cubes? Then yes, it does.
That's exactly what I'm going with. And then we've got this other version from Strixhaven. It was from the Mystical Archive. It's by Anato Finstart. It's also gorgeous. It doesn't represent lightning at all. It's almost as interesting as, say, the card Faithless Looting that had a different treatment, right? It's modernist. It's cubic. It's 20th century art. I love the aesthetic of this. Is it horror vibe? No. Is it, say, New Capenna, want to put it in the Monopoly Cube? Probably, maybe, because it's kind of fits that 20th century type of art that I'm trying to do there. Andy Warhol and all this kind of interesting modernist design, right? So there's different, between these three curated cards that I'll include in the show notes, we've got the OG, the best one, Christopher Rush. Then we've got this interesting kind of it's really neat, this redo of this card. It's an institution in Magic, but it's been modded, and now I can use this if I want to as an aesthetic piece to incorporate it into the vibe, and I dig that. Or I can go into the modernist type thing for a different situation where Lightning Bolt, and by the way, the Mystical Archives are stunning. Like, the treatments on those always turned out to be beautiful, like the printings and the foilings and whatnot. They're always like aesthetically pleasing. And that, I thought, was a nice closing example of how you can choose what fits not only your theme, your budget, and whether or not any of this matters to you at all, but it gives you a way to make your cubes pop. One more thing that I want to do to tie off, and we didn't talk about this, and I don't want to go too long on it. We had this debate last night, and I'll incorporate this, but I don't want to go too sidetracky on this one. But the Fem Cube was kind of struggling with the idea of self-mill. It was something that Chris brought up from a mechanical point of view. And the card that came up as a suggestion, and in the Fem Cube, is Grapple with the Past. For one colorless and green, you put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then you may return a creature card or a land card from your graveyard to your hand. In the art, it has an Eldrazi. It's capturing like a teddy bear in a well. Nothing about this screams Fem. But what I want to tie off with, at the bottom of the card, and I've highlighted this in the show notes, and I think I'm going to allow this for an aesthetic stretch. I haven't decided yet, not locked in. Emrakul,
You do realize that this is a 2-part of the card, right?
There's another art treatment?
So, no, this is actually a second part. So, let me grab the other one real quick.
Well, as you do that, I'm going to read the flavor text, because I wanted to lean in on the flavor text as an aesthetic.
Yeah, go for it.
Emrakul does not grant wishes, desires simply align to her will. That's the aesthetic choice to put in something called the Fem because of the flavor text, which I think is an interesting way to add another aesthetic to your cube, is through the storytelling of the cards in the flavor text and or the images on the card.
I think given that you're putting this in the Fem Cube and it references Emrakul, right? So this is the reason for Grapple with the Past, and it says Emrakul does not grant wishes, desires simply align to her will. So that, I feel like, if that's enough of a condition, if you will, that you're going to include the flavor text, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I certainly think, and this is something I've said in the past when we've had discussions about aesthetics, I think that you should always, if you can, even bend the rules a little bit on the aesthetic side. That's not to say you have to abandon them completely, but from a gameplay perspective, if it allows you to include cards that are going to improve an archetype that is already very well established within the framework of the rest of the cube, then I think you don't really need any more license to be able to do so. So I think this is absolutely a fine include. And if that's the reasoning, if anyone said, why is Grapple in the Past in your cube? Like, what's the aesthetic reasoning? And you said that, I think that's very reasonable.
No, it's extremely reasonable. The reason why is because this is actually a follow-up card to the card Make-A-Wish. So Make-A-Wish is the other card. I will put it in the text real quick so that we all can see what I'm talking about real quick. Make-A-Wish was the original art, or the prior version of like this card art, right? Where it is a girl throwing a coin into a well, making a wish, right? She's essentially a Make-A-Wish kid. In Gavany, wishing is taken as a sign of weakness, and yet the wells usually brim with silver. However, you then follow it up with Grapples of the Past, where said girl then becomes part of, Emrakul.
Now you've got me actually wanting to put Make-A-Wish in the cube for the storytelling purposes. I didn't even know that part existed.
The point is that it is very much of one of the few, not few, but Magic does a really good job creating like continuity with like the cards like these, and immediately as soon as you point out this card, like this wasn't even a second question for me, right? Because I know that this was already a narrative thing that they built up from Innistrad.
But that's an obscure aesthetic that maybe someone will have an aha, others will be like, well, why, visually is this card in the cube called the Femme? Frankly, I don't want to have the entanglement, but, I would reference the flavor text that's my justification for the mechanical properties of said card. I get it. That's an argument on both sides, but that's an aesthetics thing meets mechanical properties, right? And
I like it.
That's where it gets weird.
Great.
It's a flavor versus.
If people get weird about it, then they're weird.
Yeah, okay.
Go me for making a good suggestion. I feel good about that.
So I think that's an interesting tie-off, is we kind of cover all this. We talked about all the things you can do in curation of your cube. Do it, don't do it. It's neither here nor there. But there is a certain amount of fun in the idea. This doesn't have to happen. Don't feel like there's no FOMO involved with this. I want to joke about the thing we said where Chris is dragging his belly through the Sahara trying to get all these Magic cards as he did it for 6.5 months. No water, no sustenance. But it did take time to pull this all together. But you do it at your own pace, right? But over time,
Absolutely.
There is value in having a certain amount of basic lands that fit what you're trying to do, right? Foil, don't foil, that's a vibe. Sleeve, don't sleeve, that's a vibe. Color choice of sleeve, that's a vibe. Inner sleeves that maybe have a certain little asterisk on it that says this card's important. Our good friend Ryan Sachs, that's important. That's an aesthetic value. Or maybe a full art treatment that says, hey, this is a dragon in Dragons of Winter's Night. Maybe you should take this. I want this to be very important. It's a key piece of this cube. That's a thing. Or it's white bordered, like May talked about in Strands of Night, and it's important to her, and maybe this card visually makes it pop. These are all aesthetics that you can do as a curator to go outside of the functionality, what mechanically these cards do. Altered, treatment, signed, artist proofs. These are all something you can do to make your cube different. You can take 1,000 vintage cubes, put them side by side, and make them all completely different. Just from treatments, arts, foils, how you package it up, the storage. That's my point. It can all be different, even though the gameplay is the same. Aesthetically, it's a museum. And that's what I love about Cube. Other than that, Stu,
ties it off beautifully.
Take us to the Patreons. Patrons.
All right, as always, a huge thanks to all of our Patreons, to Patrick, to Jeff Stumpo, to Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Christensen, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Nick Lapointe, Preston, and Samuel McKay. Thank you to all of you for the ongoing support and helping us keep the lights on here at the Uber Cube podcast. As always, get in on the discussion at the Facebook MTG drafting page at facebook.com/groups/MTGcube. Are you at 2,000 members yet? I mean, we've been at 1,000 for a long
1,200 something.
1,200. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually got new ones today.
A new one. I'm seeing like one and a half, 2 a day,
1.5 a day,
1.5 a day, about the average.
Saw and a half.
That's not too bad. Saw and a half. It's a great reference. If you want to support the show, you can also use our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link for your placemats, dice bags, mouse pads, all kinds of custom and large volume products available. Hit us up on the socials. You can reach us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod or at Bluesky, UberCubeMTGPodcast.bsky.social. usual, if you've got a longer question or comment about this episode or any other, you can reach us at ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. As always, a big thanks to our Patreons at patreon.com/ubercube. I'm going to keep saying Patreons. I don't care.
In the arms of the Patreons.
Anthony's going to just keep doing that, aren't you? You can find us at
For
YouTube,
$1 a day.
Ubercube MTG Podcast 747. You crazy,
YouTube.
you lunatic.
YouTube.
And as always, come hang out with us on the Discord and look out for our new, apparently, Basic Lands channel. Swap Your Basics.
I'm working on Swap Yo Basics.
Swap Yo Basics.
Swap Yo Basics.
I love it.
All right. Other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is Happy Cubing. Chris is not there yet. Yeah, let's go. I hate meatloaf.